Rain was falling in crooked silver threads, washing the city streets that never really cared to remember the footsteps of men like me. My easel stood crooked against a brick wall, a faded tarp shielding my colors from the storm. People passed, umbrellas tilted like shields. No one stopping, no one looking. I wasn't painting for them. I was painting because I had no choice but to breathe color into a city that only ever gave me gray. That night, the cold bit through my jacket like it had teeth. I felt their stares before I heard their laughter. A squad car rolled up, red and blue lights slicing through the rain. Three officers stepped out, one chewing gum, another already pulling out his phone as if to record another joke at my expense. "Here we go again," the tallest one smirked, his boots splashing through the puddle near my feet. "What's this? Another masterpiece for the rats?" I kept my brush moving. Midnight blue spread across the cracked canvas, a sky over a broken skyline. My hands didn't shake, not because I wasn't afraid, but because I had learned long ago that fear never made art beautiful. One officer kicked an empty can across the sidewalk. "Man, I don't get why you people keep trying," he muttered loud enough for the rain to carry his words. "Nobody's buying this trash. Nobody's watching." But he was wrong. Someone was watching. A little boy clutched his mother's sleeve across the street, eyes wide as my brush turned a lifeless alley into something alive. His face held the same look I once had when my father brought home our first set of colors. Cheap, cracked, but enough to start a fire. The officers drew closer, their laughter louder, their comments sharper. "Painting fairy tales, huh? Maybe one day the mayor will hang it in his office," they jeered. One of them snapped a picture with his phone. His laughter cut the air like broken glass. I said nothing. I never do. Words were for men who had power. I had pigment and silence. Hours passed. Rain turned to mist. The night crowd thinned. My painting stood against the wall like a window into another world. A city reborn, not by steel or money, but by the hands of those it tried to erase. What they didn't know, what none of them knew, was that this painting wasn't just art. It was a confession. Buried within its colors was a story they would one day beg to understand. Because the city I painted wasn't fiction, it was memory, and the faces hidden in its windows were real. By dawn, the officers were gone, their boot prints fading in the rain. I wrapped my canvas, fingers numb, stomach empty. I left the alley before the city woke. But my painting, it didn't stay hidden for long. 2 days later, that same canvas was standing in a studio. White lights, cameras, an anchor whispering my name like a headline they couldn't ignore. The city that once stepped over my work was about to see what I had seen all along, and they weren't ready for the truth bleeding from those colors. The lights of the television studio burned hotter than any street lamp I'd ever stood under. I sat in the corner, my hands folded, as the canvas, my canvas, stood on a polished easel under 1,000 watching eyes. The anchors spoke about me like I wasn't there. They said my name, but they didn't know it. They said inspiring, controversial, a voice of the unheard. They never said hungry. They never said forgotten. They never said cold. The city watched that morning as my painting was unveiled. A skyline dripping in midnight blue, streets glowing with embered gold, and in the windows, faces. Not random, not abstract. Faces of the children who disappeared when the city turned its back. Boys whose laughter once ran down alleys now filled with sirens. Girls who never came home from school. I painted them all, their eyes lit with a fire that begged to be seen. Phones rang in every precinct that day. News trucks rolled past corners that never knew they existed. The painting became a mirror, and in that reflection, the city saw its scars. But not everyone applauded. That evening, the same officers who mocked me found my door. Their boots were heavier now, their words quieter, but their eyes carried a storm. "You made us look like fools," the tall one muttered, his voice no longer coated in laughter. "You think you're a hero now? Painting ghosts to haunt us?" I didn't answer. I only pointed to the television, my painting glowing behind the anchor. The truth was out, and it wasn't going back in the dark. Days turned to weeks. Invitations poured in, galleries, interviews, handshakes wrapped in promises. People who once crossed the street when they saw me now leaned close, their smiles warm but their pockets colder than the alleys I painted in. They wanted the story, not the scars. Then one night the city called. Not its leaders, not its wealthy hands, the city itself. A woman knocked on my studio door, her coat dripping from the same rain that once ran over my easel. She wasn't rich. Her eyes were the kind that carried names, names the world had forgotten. She handed me a photograph, a boy, missing for 7 years. You painted him, she whispered, her voice cracking like old paint. How? I looked at her, then at the canvas behind me. It was the same boy, the same smile, painted before I ever saw that photograph. Some stories don't wait for permission. They bleed into your dreams. They whisper through the bricks. They rise from the places the city buries its truth. The police came again, this time not laughing. Their questions were sharper, their eyes darting to the cameras, always following now. Where did you see them? Who told you? I told them nothing, because it wasn't a who, it was the city itself. Weeks later, the mayor unveiled a mural, a massive copy of my painting stretched across a government building. Cameras flashed, applause roared. But I stood in the crowd, unnoticed again, watching the same men who once mocked me now cut ribbons in front of my ghosts. Then the letters started arriving, not from fans, not from collectors, from mothers, fathers, brothers, each carrying the same plea. Paint them. Please, paint them so they won't be forgotten. I painted until my hands cracked, until my nights were filled with the faces of the lost. Each canvas became a doorway the city was forced to walk through. And every time the police came to tear them down, more people stood to watch. One night, as winter breathed frost against my window, the tall officer returned. No uniform this time, just a man, his face hollow. He carried a photograph, a girl, his daughter. I saw her, I whispered, the colors already forming in my mind. His eyes filled, not with pride, not with power, but with the same ache I once carried when the city erased my name. That's when I knew. The painting wasn't about art anymore. It was about memory, about forcing a city to stare at the people it pretended not to see. The boy from that first night, the one who watched me in the rain, found me years later. He had a sketchbook in his hands. I want to paint like you, he said. And for the first time I smiled, because the police could laugh, the city could turn its back, but colors never forget. They remember every name, every shadow, every echo left in the streets, and now, so would the world.